The interesting thing about going for the student market was our very first customer was a 92-year-old guy from Plymouth. Very first one ever. And I phoned him up and he was just like, this is awesome. And I suddenly realized that what we actually had done as a brand is awakened this need to not take life too seriously.
Yeah.
Patriots in the
Yeah.
comedy. I mean, I came through the ranks with the likes of Russell Howard, Rob Gilbert, Sarah Millican, Michael McIntyre. These are guys that are all on the circuit at the same time as me. He'd pulled 6 months of gigs out of my diary, which I cannot tell you how debilitating that is as a comic. And I chose tripods.
Yeah.
And everyone told me not to. I thought, well, if I'm going to do it, I was going to defy them and prove them wrong anyway.
Yeah.
I had to do it differently. Basil, if you could pipe down a bit, that'd be great. Oh, that's Jeremy.
It's
He's
Jeremy,
great.
is it?
He's
Yeah.
nice.
He might join in a sec. Give a good old move.
Everyone likes him. We can't see him, obviously, because of the green screen right behind us. 3 o'clock in the morning decisions, kind of.
I thought it was War of the Worlds.
Oh, no, I've got an idea. It was a bit like that.
Hello and welcome to Camera Central Podcast. Today we are in the green screen studio for Three-Legged Thing itself. As you can see, we've got a lovely farm in the background. We can't see this. It's just pure green screen studio. Yeah, today I'm of course joined by Danny from Three-Legged Thing, or Denny as the guys here like to call you. And we're also joined by
That happened once. Once I got called Denny on a Zoom call.
We've got a Winston, we've got a Mike, and we've got a Charles joining us here today for all of the good fun. Of course, talk about yourself, introduce yourself, what you do, and everything like that.
Just talk about myself. What, in this green screen studio
In
that
this
doesn't
green screen
exist?
studio.
Where
Yeah.
there's no farm behind us and Basil hasn't just taken a dump on camera. I'm Danny. I own Three-Legged Thing.
Your own Three-Legged Thing. The Camera Central Podcast is available both on Spotify and YouTube, so make sure you like, follow, and subscribe if you want to see more. Let's get back into it, shall we? Of course, you, in terms of a creative career, you've kind of gone through pretty much everything from being an entrepreneur, comedian. Now you do product design with Three-Legged Thing, and everything else in between. And you also did a little bit of photography. So what was that journey like for you?
Well, it started off in photography, actually. I
Yeah.
mean, that's why I sort of came full circle back to it, because when I left school, I went into college and to retake all of my exams because I failed all of them, and I had to take another couple of modules, and one of them I was offered was photography, and I thought I'll have a crack at that, and I just fell in love.
Yeah.
And actually, within 2 years, I was working at London News Service, one of the press agencies out of Farringdon in London. Went on to work for Mirror Group newspapers, News International, Reuters, PA, Alpha, all the agencies and the different papers in London. So I did that for quite a while. And then somewhere in the middle of that, I started taking pictures for MTV, doing a lot of music, a lot of stage and screen stuff. Had an opportunity to be on screen, took it, enjoyed it, moved into stand-up comedy.
Amazing.
14 years that was.
14 years. And where did Three-Legged Thing kind of appear on that kind of like
Well,
time scale?
It's weird. I was much less prolific than most of my compatriots in the comedy. I mean, I came through the ranks with the likes of Russell Howard, Rob Gilbert, Sarah Millican, Michael McIntyre. These are guys that are all on the circuit at the same time as me, and they just wrote all day long. And I wasn't disciplined enough for it, and I didn't really take it seriously enough. And I know that at the time I didn't realise that, but I look back at it now, and I think I probably should have pushed myself a little bit harder. But somewhere in the middle of it, I realised I was only working for 20 minutes, half an hour a day.
Yeah.
It's my evening gigs. And I wanted to do something else, and I wanted some more money. So I started buying and selling stuff on eBay. And that I started off with lighting, studio lighting, because I wanted some. I wanted to set myself up a little studio so I could take some pictures. And I thought, if I buy some lights, sell them, make a profit. And the whole thing, I was dead broke. I'd just had a massive falling out with my agent.
Yeah.
He'd pulled 6 months of gigs out of my diary, which I cannot tell you how debilitating that is as a comic, because you book so far in advance. And I had about 25 quid in a PayPal account somewhere. I bought a light stand on eBay for I think £23 or something like that, and begged the guy to ship it to me for 2 quid. He did, sent it to me, and then I sold it for 40 quid or something like that. I can't even remember what the numbers were, but I just did that. I just doubled down, and in the space of 6 months, I turned over 140 grand. And I just had a bit of a look at my life and went, maybe I'm doing the wrong thing.
Yeah, fair enough.
So I started trading with lighting, and then I started designing tripods for the lighting company. I actually set up a lighting company. I stopped buying secondhand and I
Yeah.
started buying branded goods and selling those. And then I had a bit of a falling out with the old Jessops, not the new Jessops, the old fangled
Yeah.
Jessops. Um, Flew to China,
Yeah.
found a factory, found the lights that they were making, changed the name on them, started selling them under my own brand.
Yeah.
That was back in, I don't know, 2007, something like that. Started designing tripods for studio use with laptop platforms. And then had an idea. Just lighting's so niche. That's the problem. There's such a small amount of photographers that actually use it.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know what? I could do this. I just need something that's a bit more commercially viable.
Yeah.
And I chose tripods.
Yeah.
And everyone told me not to.
Yeah.
Everybody, the people I knew in the industry were like, the industry does
It's
not need another tripod.
it's one of those things where, like, how do you reinvent the tripod again and again, really, isn't it?
Well,
Because
it wasn't
it's
that difficult. I'll
yeah.
be honest with you. No innovation had occurred. I mean, there was an influx of these sort of traveling tripods, the counterfold ones with the leg that unscrews for a monopod.
Yeah.
And that was invented by Gitzo in 1983.
Yeah.
Now, this was 2008, 2009, something like that. And so we're, nearly 30 years on from that invention. The patent had gone off because they only last 20 years, a few years previously. And
Yeah.
so everybody had jumped on that same bandwagon, but nobody else was innovating.
Yeah.
And I just thought, I can do this. I can do it differently. I can do it better. Um, Probably a bit arrogant of me at the time.
But I think when it comes to the identity of three-legged thing, just going on from what you're saying there, you've done a very good job at kind of like having a comical aspect to the videos, but also the design just in general. I think that's what people really appreciated it, and also the build quality
Well,
as
it's the
well.
brand identity was the first thing that I came up with.
Yeah,
The reality was everybody said to me, "Don't do tripods. There's the market's saturated." And I thought, well, if I'm going to do it, I was going to defy them and prove them wrong anyway.
yeah,
I had to do it differently. Everybody was producing the same stuff. I mean, look, there's some great tripod brands out there, and I was looking intensively at Manfrotto, at Gitzo, at Bemro, um, Enduro, one of the Bemro brands. You had Giottos back then, Vanguard, Velbon, all of these different entities were all just producing the same thing.
yeah,
None of them were sort of branching away from what was, you know, tried and tested build of a tripod.
yeah,
And so I thought I could start producing tripods, but unless I stand out from that crowd, I'm just going to get lost in the mire. And so the first thing I did was introduce color to tripods, which nobody had done at that point. Um, I mean, our first offerings came in 6 different colors. That was a
yeah,
massive error.
yeah.
The stock control on that was a disaster, absolute
Not
disaster.
necessarily good to do that, but introducing colors. I mean, there was that video that you had, which was colors to tripods, right? And it sounds like a really weird thing to talk about, but it does make sense because there are a lot of people that are like, I don't want color in my gear because I don't want it to reflect off of stuff. But in this day and age, I think it gives a unique identity to the
I
stuff.
think the reflection thing's true. If you're in a closed environment
Mm,
in a light tight studio and you're photographing jewelry or silver or something like that, you don't want a anodized bright blue ball head. Oh my god, you're on a farm.
green
You
screen
don't.
studio.
You don't. Green screen studio. Sorry, yeah, my bad. Basil, if you could pipe down a bit, that'd be
Uh,
great. No, you don't. I appreciate in that sort of. Oh, that's Jeremy.
it's
He's
Jeremy,
great.
is it?
He's
Yeah, he
nice.
might join in a sec. Give a good old move.
Everyone likes him. We can't see him obviously because of the green screen right behind us.
I'll get a shot of
Um,
Jeremy later.
no, I can see that there's limitations in those sorts of environments, but for the majority of us using tripods, there's no color cast coming off of it, and actually a massive proportion of photographers that work outdoors use tripods. I mean, we're talking about landscape photographers, wildlife, birders, all that sort of thing. And actually they're they don't want black. Or it's not that they don't want black because they never had any other offering, but black is the only color that doesn't occur naturally.
Yeah.
The exception of pandas, penguins, and ninjas, all of which are entirely fictional. I mean, it just doesn't exist. It's the absence of all light. And so it didn't make any sense to me that the one color that everybody was choosing to put on their tripods
Yeah.
was black. So we moved away. We went, we were completely off kilter in the first sense with like 6 different colours and whatever else.
Mm.
But by the time we came full circle a couple of years later and we'd started to really bring the colours into something that was tangible, that had a meaning for it, and we started working on the earth tones,
Yeah.
the ocean blue, the earth bronze,
Yeah.
etc. And the only thing that didn't really sit within that was our little blingy orange bits, but that's the brand identity.
Yeah.
And it actually wasn't long after that when Sony started using the same sort of identifier on their lenses and on the
No, no,
cameras and stuff.
exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, I just wanted to do something that was a bit different, and I think people embrace it, and we proved that. Even a few years ago, people were saying, "Look, why don't you bring out something black?" And I thought, why not? We'll do this super matte black stealth darkness
Yeah.
thing that we've ended up calling it, and and people do buy them because they look great, but we still sell more
Mm.
of the earth tones, many more.
Yeah. No, definitely, and I think it's again come down to that brand identity that you have founded with three-legged thing, because that's half of it. And I mean, buying into a brand, buying into an ethos, with everything else you have behind it, like the artwork for your boxes that you, yeah, I don't necessarily do as much these days, but back in the day, it's a big kind of like part of your identity,
We
standing
still do
out from
it.
the crowd.
We still do it, but what we found is as we've grown, um, initially when we only had a few SKUs and stuff like that, and stores were like, "Look, we love this. You got the cartoon monsters and stuff like that, and this is all great." But then what started to happen is you start to grow and you start to grow your inventory and grow your product portfolio. It then became quite confusing, and so we toned it down a bit. We probably went too far the other way,
Yeah,
and so what we've done now is we've still got some of our stuff's still bright and stuff like
yeah,
that. I'm leaning more towards very natural boxes at the minute. We're
yeah,
trying to get away from using anything that's UV printed
yeah.
or got laminates on it and stuff like that, so that everything we bring out is recyclable or from recycled sources, etc. Um, but we try and make up for that by putting funnies on the box. There's loads of nonsense that we just make up and stick on the boxes, don't we?
Just do it. Just do it. Like it's part of the fun, really.
It's really childish, but yeah, why not?
Why not? No, exactly.
And the funny thing is that all these sort of corporate entities, and I'm not going to make any, not going to cast aspersions over any of
Sony,
our
Canon, Apple.
well, I was just thinking more, even in the tripod space,
Yeah.
they don't have the balls to just go, yeah, let's write something stupid on the box.
No.
Whereas I just don't care.
Well, I think it's more about it adds, and I think this is what people who use your products, and I've been using your products professionally for a long time as well.
That's nice to hear.
It's actually, yeah, Winston actually, with a video head. Um, Personality, I think, in this day and age sells a lot because as we approach this kind of like digital era where everything's kind of like pushed in your face, it's like we're looking for personality in places. It's why stories have been able to sell more. So that's the idea of the soft sale and stuff like that. People want to find out more about a company, and if you've got a company that's got a little bit more fun to it, I think that's ideally kind of like what people will want to go buy into.
Yeah, yeah. And what's interesting about that is when I first set up Three Legged Thing, our intention, our target audience was 16 to 24.
Yeah.
There was a sort of a dwindling ecosphere of photographers coming through. I know, there's jokes about everybody thinks they're a photographer these days, but actually, camera sales are down
Yeah.
and they've been gradually declining for 20 years probably
Mm.
now. Um, and I looked at the problem and just went, there's young people are just not coming through to do photography. And I thought if we can try and appeal to them,
Mm.
then perhaps we can change that. Perhaps we can change that dynamic, the growth of the photography populace
Yeah.
from youngsters coming out of school, going through college. A lot of schools nowadays have got fantastic photographic
Mm.
studios and centers and dark rooms, etc. And what really opened my eyes is we went in with this whole let's grab the student bunch. They'll get it. They'll get the cartoon monsters and
Mm.
all the we called ourselves Three Legged Thing.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a 3 o'clock in the morning decision, kind of.
I thought it was War of the Worlds.
I've got an idea. It was
Yeah.
a bit like that.
Yeah. I thought it was like a War of the Worlds kind of reference or something with the
No, do you know it
tripods.
was interesting because we sat down as a team. There's only 3 of us back then, and I said to the guys, "What should we call ourselves?" And we had a guy called Sean working for us back then, and he went, why don't we call it Three Legged Fish?" And I actually contemplated it. I went, "That's genius." I mean, it's terrible, but also genius at the same
Yeah.
time. And and I sort of sat at home running it over my head, and I thought, "There's something in that. There's something in the fact that we just take some sort of really random phrase
Yeah.
and apply it to our products." And I came back in the morning. I said, "I've got it. Let's call it a three-legged thing because that's what it is." Um,
It makes so much sense just because like, most people would, like, if someone had a tripod, they didn't know anything about brands, they didn't know it was called a tripod, what would you call it? It'd be a three-legged thing
well, and that's
anyway, so
become
I think.
problematic actually. Uh,
Has it?
yeah. Let me go back to the colours thing, and then I'll come back to that, just so
Okay.
because otherwise I'll forget. The interesting thing about going for the student market was our very first customer was a 92-year-old guy from Plymouth. Very first one ever in the whole history of our company. When we launched, and I put all the adverts in all the magazines and stuff like that, we showed all the fancy colours, and they were called like solar flare and cosmic green, and it was it's nonsense, whatever
Yeah.
we were making up. Moon dust, I think, was the sort of titanium coloured thing because we were trying to be cool.
Yeah.
And our first customer was a 92-year-old bloke. And I phoned him up and he was just like, "This is awesome." And I suddenly realized that what we actually had done as a brand is awakened this kind of this need to not take life too seriously.
Yeah.
And I think actually, because we're not the cheapest brand.
No.
We're trying to, and a lot of that's to do with the size of us as a company. It's very difficult for us to produce
Yeah.
things in the volumes that will allow us to bring those prices down. And
Yeah.
that's why the prices are where they are. But we're working on it and we're
Yeah.
growing. But actually, what happened was the people that were buying our products were mid 30s to mid 50s
Yeah.
for the most part,
Yeah.
completely different to our demographic.
Yeah.
And that's when I realized actually our products were probably too expensive for the 16 to 24-year-olds.
Mm.
But we became a brand that started to become aspirational. And then the name started to cause problems. So as soon as we started to diversify away from tripods,
Yeah.
in our heads, three-legged thing didn't work for anything.
Yeah.
Like when we brought out the first monopod, we called it the one-legged thing. Bob was
Yeah.
actually what it was called. But as we started to we started to design bags. We launched Toxic in 2021,
Yeah.
21. Um, I should have just done it under the three-legged thing
Yeah.
badge, but in my head, I got a bit trapped in the fact of going, the three-legged thing is tripods. It's three-legged thing,
Yeah.
but it's nonsense. It's just, what's a brand identity?
Yeah. No, exactly. It's an identity and an ethos to live by. But I think why, if you do end up doing bags, what I think would be I think it would be interesting to apply that sort of aspect that you've got with your brand, having little Easter eggs here and there of just like little funny bits, because there is a very kind of like big standardization of kind of like what a bag should look like these days. So you got the average camera bag, which you see from Lowpro and stuff like that, which is fine, people like them. And then you got the peak design, and a lot of people doing peak design-esque kind of bags quite heavily. Um, but I think with you, I think what would be interesting to see, this is from my perspective, tell me off if I'm just overstepping the mark. But
Say whatever you like.
yeah, yeah. What I'd really love to see is just something that embraces that core identity that you actually have, because I think it's something that's very special about your company.
Well, we're working. Look, we've got some soft goods coming. I
Yeah,
can tell you that much. You've probably seen some in the office as you visited.
yeah,
I know you were in yesterday.
yeah,
Um, and three-legged thing as a brand. I mean, the logo. It, I just, I'll never fall out of love with it. We can get bored of it, and I think sometimes we have to remind ourselves that, especially when it comes to using artworks, some of the music we use for some of the videos, that because we've heard them a million times, we
yeah,
get absolutely bored out of our skulls. But actually, 90% of our video views or people looking at artworks and stuff like that are first timers. It's the first time they've seen it. It's the first time they come across our brand
yeah,
identity, the sort of culture of this business. And so to them, it's quite refreshing.
yeah,
So we have to try and remember that. The one thing that has never really dampened for me is the logo. It's Leonard and the
yeah.
three-legged thing logo. And it's worked. It's worked so well for us.
Mm. It's unique. I do really love the branding just behind everything with Three
Well,
Legged
we
Thing.
try to be really subtle as well. I mean, actually, I've recently been told my US sales manager Kim keeps telling me off and saying we need to start putting the brand name on stuff so that people know what it is, like the product identifiers, because despite us being quite in your face and
Yeah,
stuff like that, we're actually quite subtle. There's very little branding on the actual products.
yeah,
The branding's all about the marketing aspect of it and
yeah.
getting it into people's, homes and
Mm.
getting people to see what we can do. But actually, the tripods, we got a sticker on that tells you what the name of the product is. But half our products don't have stickers on the
No.
say because there's not a space for it, and I didn't want to make something so small. But I'm gonna have to start listening to my sales team.
Listen to stuff.
I get told off a lot.
Yeah, it's fine. No, don't we all really? But yeah, well, it's kind of up to you. I think the thing, a big thing behind product design in general is kind of like the silhouette that things like. If you've got a unique silhouette behind like a camera, you know that camera's that camera, right? And it kind of works without actually having the logo to it in general. And I think with three-legged thing, you be able to see a silhouette of it and kind of tell that that's a three-legged thing opposed to other tripods because of course you have your sort of the unique design of the actual um tightening bits on the. I'm going to be really kind of like
Leg locks.
untechnical leg locks. Yeah, there you go, leg locks and all of that. But even to the point where you've got the way in which the head forms and everything like that, it looks really good.
But there's a lot of reasons. Look, our design process is broken down into three aspects really: innovation
Yeah,
or revolution, depending on whether or not we're creating a new product or taking a product and revolutionizing it. Engineering,
yeah,
which is our really is our sort of stalwart. That's what we're known for
mm,
amazing engineering standards. And design, visuals,
yeah,
aesthetics. That's the three basics. And what's interesting is I didn't I didn't know I could do this until I owned a tripod company. Like when I started Three Legged Thing, I found a factory that was making these little tripods that looked pretty cool, and I went, "Oh, can I do that?" And what about colors and stuff? Um, they had this like whole rack of I can't even remember what it was. It was like key rings or something like that, swag they were giving away, and
yeah,
they were little aluminium tubes that were anodized different colors. And I said, "Is this can we make this out of this stuff?" And they went, "It is made out of this stuff." And I went, "Well, why haven't you done colors on this? Why is it black?
yeah,
Because people want black." And I went, "Well, so could I do this red?" And they went, "Why would you do that?" And I went, "Because I want to." And that's really where it started. And I'd said to them, "I like this. Can we like we were the first ones to introduce multiple section center columns."
yeah,
And all I did was took a sample from them. I took two samples from them, took the leg off one and put it into the column
mm,
because it was the same tubing size. And I went, well, why can't
yeah,
we do this? We can make a travel tripod that runs 5 inches off the floor all the way up to over 2 meters, which
yeah,
was the original Brian. That's what we did. And it was groundbreaking.
yeah,
And it wasn't until that first batch was out and then I started to look at things and go, do you know what? I need to start working on the other bits like
yeah,
the leg locks, the leg catches, the canopy, the mounting plates. I need to stuck like mounting plates is a classic example. Most tripods have got a round mounting plate.
yeah,
Now, where the mounting plate detaches, because there are other tripods where that happens, and then you can attach that to the canopy so
yeah,
that you can lose the column. The problem was you can get cold fusion between your head and or a cold weld between your head and the mounting plate,
yeah.
and you can't get it off.
No,
So I designed the tri-mount plate to give you something to grip on, so you could take it off your head if you needed to.
yeah,
And then actually we added the functionality to that, the holes in the spurs, so you could put your tools on it, clip your key ring to it, a
yeah,
tether, whatever. And I didn't realize that we could do what we did until I was doing what we did.
yeah,
And when we're designing stuff now, I mean it's not a closed process. I mean,
no,
everybody in the company has access to me and has the ability to turn around and say, "I'd like to do this," or "I want to try this," or "Wouldn't it be good if this did this?" And I tend to challenge it. I would say. I tend to push back. Well, but people have to justify their reasons for giving us
oh,
these
for sure,
ideas
yeah, yeah,
because my time is so limited. I've got so much to do.
yeah.
And Rob, my head of engineering, is quite good at just translating. Like you should see my drawings.
Draw a
I'm like a
sketch,
5-year-old
yeah,
grey crayon, just.
yeah.
Um, he's quite good at translating. He
Yeah.
speaks fluent Danny. Um, but when we're sitting down and we're looking at like we're designing a new tripod range in a minute,
Yeah,
and everybody has an option to say, I'd like to see this. And so what we do is we look at each of the technologies in isolation
mm,
and we say to ourselves, what does that bring? Is it innovative? Is it something that somebody else isn't doing? Is it something people will use?
yeah,
Because how often do we invent stuff that nobody uses, right?
yeah,
You know,
That's half of it, isn't it? Really?
but people, do you know what's really interesting? Megan does a lot of demonstrations when she's at stores or she's
Yeah.
at trade shows or whatever else. She does a lot of the demoing, and people get blown away by the kind of transformative nature of our products, the sort of gadget
Yeah.
capabilities and all these things. Now, this is the sale. That's the marketing thing. Like people are going, "Oh my god, look! It does this, it does that," and then when push comes to shove, and you ask them how they're using the product,
Yeah.
boom, chink. That's it. They're just taking
Yeah.
pictures. So we look at all these different technologies. We look at how we can integrate them, what we're doing. But actually, our prime remit, our primary remit, is to make a tripod do what a tripod does. What's a tripod designed to do?
I'll put a camera on it and keep it stable, really.
It's to hold your camera steady. That
Yeah.
is it,
Yeah.
right? It's got to keep it secure and steady. So it's got to be rigid. It's got to be stable.
Mm.
That's the most important thing. And and it's great that we've got all these gadgets and stuff, but your tripod has to do the function of a tripod.
Yeah.
And what we try to look at is when the most challenging times people were using a tripod. I mean, it's not in a studio.
Yeah.
You could take the thinnest legged tripod you possibly want to and use it in a studio. If you're running on a remote shutter and you're not touching the tripod, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It could be something that's designed to hold half a kilo and you've got 10 kilos worth of gear on it. It's all bent and stuff. But once it settles, it's not going anywhere.
Mm.
It's in a stable environment. It's as soon as you move outside, it's as soon as you start looking at different terrains, it's as soon as you start looking at inclement weather conditions,
Yeah.
when you're looking at difficult, challenging shots where you're trying to get over something, under something, through something, whatever you might need to do.
Yeah.
And that's where the innovation comes in. And the first priority for us when we're bringing out anything new in tripod wise is to make sure that it holds more
Mm.
than it needs to
Yeah.
and it stands still in a wind tunnel.
Mm.
Like it's really important. We blast these things with so much. Megan stands on them, swings from them, walks across them
Yeah.
like they're stepping stones,
Yeah.
so that we can test the capabilities.
Yeah.
And you can take. I'll give you an example. I was in Japan last year,
Yeah.
and I asked our Japanese distributor what their best selling tripod was, and they pulled it. I'm not going to mention brands, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
They pulled this thing out, and this is a 600-pound tripod.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, this is the difference between a tripod company
Yeah.
designing a tripod and a company designing a tripod to fit into their product portfolio.
Yeah.
And I chose the smallest person. I said, who's the smallest, weakest person here? And this woman's put her hand up. And I handed her this 600-pound tripod, extended the leg, and I said, I just want you to just push down on it. And it just pancaked. There was no weight and just straight down. And then I took our cheapest tripod,
Mm.
took a leg off, tightened it up, handed it to the strongest guy in the room. And I said, make that move. And he was on it. And you're talking about 100, 120 kilo load
Yeah.
capabilities because that's what photographers need. They
Yeah.
need a stable platform. They need something that can hold their camera still so that when they're shooting
Mm.
super long
Yeah.
exposures in terrible weather conditions, they get the shot. So that's primary, it's primary objective. And the way you do that is with great engineering. We look at the real physics of it. Our leg locks are oversized for a reason because there's more torque. You get more torque in your turn, you get tighter locking
Yeah.
mechanism, you get greater stability, more rigidity, you get less flex through the legs. We removed the rubber bands that go around the legs because rubber perishes after a while. And actually, because the way they're put onto most leg locks is they're just air pumps. So they pump it up and it expands and then they pop it on.
Yeah.
There's no actual adhesive
Yeah.
quality there. They shift and they move and
Yeah.
whatever else. And we needed something that people could grip, even when wearing thick gloves, that would not repel water, but dissipate it to an extent where you could
Yeah.
still gain the grip. And that's where those leg locks came from. That's where the O-rings came from. That's
Mm.
where or the O-pads as we call them. On the original Pro ranges where we just had the chamfered edges and then the pads in
Yeah.
between because there's so much grip there and it changed the products. Now it made it heavier.
Yeah.
So we got that criticism. Oh, your tripods are quite heavy. I'm like, yeah, but I hear the words lightweight and I think three sheets to the wind after one sniff of the barmaid's
And
apron.
that's the big thing. I mean, there is another tripod manufacturer, again, we don't necessarily need to name names, where they've reinvented the tripod. And I used it for content creation for a little while because it was the right kind of like feel to actually put on my back, right? But the biggest thing that I always had an issue with it is it would end up starting to tilt by itself. You know, it's not strong enough to hold weight really. The wind would make it vibrate and things like that. And when it comes to design and kind of what you were talking about there, which I'm finding more and more fascinating because I'm discovering things about these tripods that I didn't even realize. But do you know what the thing is? Is when you actually use the tripod, like earlier when I was trying to take a head because I was setting something up in the office over there. I was trying to remove a head and I was taking the head off and it, you know, taking it off so easily because of the kind of like three-pronged design to the top bit, right? And it's something that I didn't even think about at the time, and, you know, I wasn't even thinking about until, you know, you were talking about, you know, you put this kind of, like, engineering to make it so much easier for people to use a tripod, but it doesn't actually isn't actually something people would realise straight away
Well,
until
but
doing
they
it.
did realise. I mean, everything we do, we've done as a result of feedback from customers. So a lot of our design ideas don't just come from us; they're
Yeah.
coming from people saying, "I love this," but like in the first batch of products that we ever introduced in when we launched in 1111,
Mm,
a couple of guys came back and they said my mounting plate's fused to my head,
yeah,
and I went, "Huh." Well, that's no good. And I said, send it back to us. We'll send you. We sent them new ones.
yeah,
Um, And they were properly fused. Like they tightened these things on, they tightened up the pan base, they'd locked it in place, undone the pan, got themselves lined up for the shot, locked it off. And then when they went to take it off, take the head off to
mm,
put a different head on, the mounting plate came with it. Now we could solve that by gluing the mounting plate to the top of the column, but then you lose functionality.
yeah,
You can't remove that column unless you put a separate plate in, and then that makes the product more expensive. Like we
yeah,
wanted to make this an integrated system. And as soon as I realized there was a problem, we fixed it.
yeah,
That's what we did, and actually, up until about 2014, used to get really miffed when I'd see posts in forums going, "Oh, three-legged thing is just rebranded Benro." I saw that a lot. Rebranded
really?
Benro. Oh my god! Or rebranded Giottos, or rebranded. Oh, it did my tits in, I can tell you. Um, and so the tri-mount plate was my fuck you to the industry.
Yeah.
Excuse my
No, it's fine.
language. You have to cut that one out. But I mean, it was my middle finger to everybody else. It was my Ross.
Yeah.
It's important. It's an important reference that for
Important
Megan.
reference. It's one of the best references, to be
Yeah.
fair. Yeah, yeah,
Who
for
doesn't
sure.
love a bit of Friends?
Yeah,
Because again, it, it was meaningless to most people,
yeah,
but it was intrinsically three-legged thing.
yeah,
It was ours. We had somewhere where you could tether something to. We had somewhere where you could leave your tools attached to. We had a product that you could detach from your head without any fuss at all.
yeah,
It sat seamlessly in between the legs when you were folding the thing up. And it gave us, and you know, there's like a whole bunch of quarter 20 slots on the top. So it became a mounting platform for multiple devices. Like it's not the greatest thing since sliced bread,
no,
but it was uniquely ours.
yeah,
And then you know these are the sorts of progressions we make, and it's becoming harder. I've got to tell you,
yeah.
trying to innovate in this arena is becoming harder.
And it always will be, you know, because as tech advance, people are going to try and push out. But you know, you were talking originally, kind of like at where you first came into the industry, and you reinvented something which had kind of been forgotten about. And that's the thing I think. Well, tripods will always kind of like suffer with is kind of like you create a tripod, but unless you create something new, it's like what else are you going to really add to it? And you guys have done really well at creating fun, interesting, unique brand identity, brilliant quality tripods just in general. Um,
but you know what
and
we
I can't wait.
contribute
I
to
can't
this?
wait to see what comes next from you. I genuinely can't.
Well, I'll tell you what we contributed to this industry more than anything else was competition.
Yeah,
It didn't exist.
yeah,
I mean, Manfrotto own 40% of global tripod sales. They just do. The Videndum Group are massive,
yeah.
and rightly so. They make some fantastic products. I'm not diminishing what they've achieved,
No,
um, but these big corporate hierarchies takes them a long time to innovate
yeah,
because things have got to run up and down the chains. They've got to be signed off by 20 different people.
mm,
You've got various different committees and forums and blah blah blah. Whereas we just go, I like that. Let's make it.
yeah,
And actually, us starting to innovate in this arena caused everyone to start to innovate. And we, you know, there's brands coming through all the time now. We see some of the stuff they're making and we're like, that is cool.
yeah,
I mean, there's some really awesome little things that we see people just coming up with, you know, the ideas that people have for tripods. I saw something recently that made me go, I'd quite like to license that technology
Yeah.
because it was so different, so innovative. So we're not. I suppose we're free thinkers, but
Yeah.
we're by no means the cutting edge anymore. I
No.
mean, there's stuff coming through all the time. That's what we brought to the industry:
Yeah.
a sense of competition,
A spark.
and yeah, and drunken ramblings.
Mm. Yeah, I mean that's the important thing. To be fair, we should have had a couple beers here today, really, shouldn't we?
Well, I didn't want to spill anything on the green screen.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, just in case, we can't stain it. It's expensive, isn't it?
It's interesting, actually. People think that we're
Don't like this.
people think we're real enemies with other tripod brands. It's just such nonsense.
No.
I've got some great friends that work for Manfrotto. Chris
Yeah.
Carr, who was the sort of head of Manfrotto. Hey,
Love it, Trade Festival come out.
yeah. I mean, he's now their VP of marketing,
Yeah.
or he's what's their CMO, is it, or something like that? I mean, he's had an incredible career
Yeah.
going from starting off in Manfrotto right away to the top of the ladder now. All these guys, I met Marco, he's the Mr. Manfrotto himself when he came over to the UK, and we've sit and had a beer together, and I, there's just
I
so many
think
people in this industry that I get on so well
Yeah,
with.
yeah. I think it kind of falls into the photography industry there as well. It is, people are like, oh, you must hate each other because you're the competition, and it's just like
No,
you can't really apply that to like every relationship that you have. What you should see is they are going to make you better because they're going to maybe do something that actually makes a little bit more sense, and you're going to be like, well, I need to do something. It's going to drive you to be better.
well, and here's something that people don't think about, right? Which is this true. I don't know the inner workings of Videndum and Manfrotto and
Yeah,
Sackler and those companies that are part of that group, right? What I do know, I've been told before, is that 10% of their profits go towards marketing. And the more they tell people to buy tripods, the more tripods I sell.
yeah,
It's as simple as that.
yeah,
The more tripod companies are here, they provide competition, which creates innovation.
yeah,
You create a competitive environment where you're all trying to bring out things that are different to other people. I mean, we've just brought out a release plate, right? I mean, we did that as a little sort of experiment on Kickstarter because we've never used a crowdfunding platform,
yeah,
and we thought we've got some ideas coming through
yeah,
later this year which are gonna be immense relative
yeah,
to the Ultra plate. But we started with something as simple as a release plate and went, why has this just been a lump of metal with a camera screw for so
yeah,
long? Like, what can we do differently about
yeah,
it? We innovated and we put it on Kickstarter, and the uptake has been incredible. We've sold a couple of thousand of these things. I mean, it's out of nowhere.
yeah,
If I'd have just launched them in November, we wouldn't have sold 2,000 units
yeah,
by now. It's bonkers. So I like having competition. I
yeah,
like the fact that there are other companies out there going around championing tripods,
yeah,
and we'll lose customers to them. Of course we will, but we'll gain some.
yeah, yeah, definitely. So, from what I'm getting from what we've really been talking about,
Tell me
there are
what you're
two
getting.
sides to kind of like how you are as a person when it comes to three-legged thing. Do you reckon it's the creativity that drives you, or do you reckon it's kind of having a very logical mind when it comes to it, or do you reckon it's the creativity that allows you to think in a different kind of more logical way?
No, it's pure alcohol. It's
Yeah,
there's
pure alcohol. I think the best ideas have actually been done on beer
yeah,
mats.
I've got no doubt. Look, I mean, we've come up with ideas when we've gone out as a team. We've
Yeah,
been sat in the pub having a drink, and somebody's gone, "Oh, it'd be really cool if we go, huh? Let's do that."
yeah,
I have a pen and pad next to my bed at all
yeah,
times. I used to do this when I was a comedian, and actually writing songs because I come up with a riff and I'd have to sit down, write the music or the lyrics or whatever else.
yeah,
But as a comedian, I used to have it because I come up with jokes in my sleep and I'd write them down, and then I'd wake up in the morning, read it and go, what the fuck is that? Just nonsense. But when it comes to ideas for tripods, I learned the hard way that if you don't get those ideas down, you forget them.
yeah,
And then 3 years down the line, somebody else invents exactly what you were thinking
yeah,
about, and you go,
yeah,
annoying. So I I just think it's important to keep an open mind.
yeah,
I think it's important to embrace. It's really easy to see other people bring products out and go, "What's that?
yeah,
Oh, look what they've done," and then you see it become a massive, massive success.
mm,
Um, and you ask yourself, "Well, what are they doing that we're not?" And the simple fact is that they've appealed to an audience and they've reached it.
yeah,
The Sun newspaper, absolute drivel, best newspaper in the world. Why? because it targets an audience and it reaches it. The
Yeah.
biggest selling newspaper of all time,
Yeah.
because it targets the people it wants to sell it to and it makes that happen.
Yeah.
Is it the
And it
best
works.
content?
No,
Well, it's,
probably.
and then you look at the Times, which is the same company. I mean, I
Yeah.
worked for both of them.
Yeah.
Same stories in both.
Yeah.
One's presented one way, one's presented the other. And yet, the sort of well-to-dos will be sitting there with the Times newspapers, the
Yeah.
broadsheets and whatever else, and all they're doing is reading the same content that
Just written a
you
different
know,
way in it. Yeah.
truck driver sitting down there. I mean, I'm being a bit, I'm
Generalization.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Just a bit.
massively. Somebody sitting with a currant bun eating a fry up.
Yeah.
Who's doing it right?
Yeah.
Well, the people that are appealing to most. So there's a lot of that. I see that in this industry a lot. I see people come out, bring out innovations, and quite often think, how has that done as well as it has? But
Yeah.
you can't help applaud them. I mean, you have to. You have to just tip your hats and just go, I wish I could do that. I get
Yeah.
jealous. I do. I get jealous. I'm still waiting to fund my first Lamborghini.
Oh, fair
Not
enough.
likely to happen these days.
So you've got somebody who's looking to start creating a product, getting into the creative industry. What advice would you give them here when they're just starting out?
You got to be committed. You can't just sort of whimsically sit there with an idea and do nothing about it. If you got an idea, do something about it. My approach to it would be try and find a company that's making like a you need to find a manufacturer for anything, right? I don't know what proportion of goods are made in China or Vietnam, or
Yeah.
bags tend to be Vietnam, hard goods tend to be China. You've got stuff coming out of Taiwan that's really, really good now, like
Yeah.
great in engineering. Germany, Poland, they've all got their Mexico really good for fabric products. Turkey's really good at woven products,
Yeah.
fabrics, things like that. Egypt are really good at cottons and stuff. So every country has its I guess, its unique appeal to manufacturing in
Yeah.
some way. So find the space that is most likely to be making the product that you're trying to create,
Yeah.
and have a look at manufacturing companies in those regions. Have a look at other products in that market space, and try and find the source back to manufacturing. I mean, I started Three-Legged Thing with 7 grand.
$7,000.
That basically paid for a website and a few samples, a trip to China.
Yeah.
And then once I had the idea out and I'd sketched it out, and we paid a little artist to come along and sketch out the products, and then I presented it to the other people in the company, and they went, "Oh, we can do this." And then I borrowed some money to make it happen.
Yeah.
Um, it was a challenge. I mean, we didn't turn a profit till 2016.
Yeah.
Like 6 years of digging a bigger hole.
Yeah.
Massive, massive risk. So I think good entrepreneurs tend to be, they tend to be risk averse, but not afraid to take that leap.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to speculate to accumulate.
Yeah.
You've got to take a leap.
And sometimes it may be like you said, it took you 6 years to become profitable, right? 6 years.
Well, the problem with coming up with a good idea, I think we'd have been profitable much sooner if we'd have been less prolific.
Yeah.
The problem with coming up with a good idea is that you fall into that trap of you grow too quickly.
Yeah.
We ran out of money.
Yeah.
Like so quickly. When we first started selling to B&H and Adorama, which was amazing. I hadn't heard of either of them, but
Yeah.
they came to us and said, "We want to sell your products." And then I flew over to New York and I sat down and had meetings, and I got two 90 grand orders. 90 grand orders. I didn't even know how to fund that stock. I
Yeah.
didn't have the money to fund that stock, and it nearly bankrupted us
Yeah.
because I'm sat there with $180,000 worth of orders, and I needed whatever it was, a serious chunk of money to manufacture the products to fulfill those orders.
Yeah.
And I had a deadline on how long before I could fulfill those orders because they sunk their money into it. And we got to sort of March in 2012, and I'd committed about every single resource that we had into making these products to fulfill big orders and to expand. And I had no money to pay salaries. I had no, and we nearly went under. And I don't know what I was going to do. So I had to get investment. And you can become a victim of your own success.
Yeah.
And it's not bad planning. They're all the right things to do. Sometimes you just have to put the brakes on and just take it back a bit, and we've learned that as well.
But
Sell too much to one company, you can
yeah,
end up getting it back. There's all sorts of
yeah.
trappings.
I think the biggest thing, the biggest takeaway from there is like you didn't give up through all of that, because a lot of people would have given up 1, 2 years down the line, not making any
Yeah,
money.
I mean, I'd given up the comedy in 2010 because my daughter was a year old, and I didn't want to miss her growing up. So I turned this into a full-time gig. And I don't really play nicely with others. Working for other people doesn't work for me. I mean, I love working with the people that I work with now. I think we're a great team. I think we're really cohesive. We have our moments,
Yeah,
small companies. I mean, when it blows up, doesn't it? Um, but uh, I didn't want to work for somebody else, and so I had to make this work.
yeah,
I wanted to buy myself a house. I
yeah,
wanted to be able to provide for my family without having to worry where the next check was coming from. And
yeah,
actually, I made it worse for a long time. A long time. It
yeah.
was a challenge. But the one thing I am is tenacious.
I definitely can feel that about you. To be fair,
Uh-oh.
force of nature. Oh, I think that's probably where we need to do some
He
stuff.
can go out the other way. Leave it. He can go out the other way.
Oh, they can't get through that bollard then.
Yeah, of course they can. That's where he's just come from.
There you go. Hang on, mate. Yeah. Oh well, a lot of fun. To be fair, we've run this. We may not be shooting this on the green screen. We're shooting this on a road, which is probably a little bit more dangerous, but it's a beautiful view.
Yeah,
To be fair, um,
that's
is there anything?
that's
Oh,
Gertrude and
there's
Jemima.
Gertrude and Jemima. I'll get some shots of them later on. Sprinkle them in. A
I
little
used
bit
to
of
walk across.
tastiness.
I lived about a mile and a half away as the crow flies, and I used to come across. I'd either come this way or
Yeah,
come across the farms, and I stopped doing it because every time I stepped into the field, I'd start getting followed. First, it'd be sheep. Like I've got great videos that we put on our socials years and years ago, where I'd be walking along with a dog, and there'd be like 40, 50 sheep behind, just closing in on us.
yeah.
Terrifying. Oh, he's coming back. Oh, he wanted to go round to his own unit. Look at
Oh,
that. So I used to quite like. I love being on the farm.
yeah,
I was trading out my garage
yeah,
when I first had the lighting company. Then I moved to a chicken. They were proper chicken sheds back
yeah,
then. None of this landscaping stuff.
yeah,
We paved the way for this estate really. But I mean, there's a lot of people have been here and seen when we were an actual chicken shed. We had wind down eaves, like you could do that, and all the eaves had come down, so you could let the air flow through the shed and stuff. And we used to have people knock on the door going, "Can we buy some eggs?" No, you can't, mate. We don't do them anymore. No chickens here. It used to be a proper poultry farm.
No, no two-legged things. Only three-legged things
Yeah,
in here.
and um, and I've always loved it here. It's serene, it's peaceful. I mean, it's busier now.
It's really lovely. It's really lovely
It's
here.
amazing. And if
Yeah,
you go up onto the top of the of Kinsbourne Farm, where you can look over the whole of sort of the Bedfordshire Valley, you can see
yeah,
the Cardington Hangars,
yeah,
which is where the Airlander was built, and then they've got the Warner Brothers studio where they filmed the Batman
yeah.
movies, the Christian Bale ones, and also Inception was filmed there. The view from the top there is incredible.
Amazing. Is there anything else that you want to add?
I don't think so. I've
Don't
been
think
talking
so.
out my arse for I don't know how long. How long have we done this?
Don't
Like
know.
an hour.
It's been really fascinating. Genuinely, really nice to get to know you a little bit more. We've got a lot of kind of like cool ideas, stuff we can do together in the future, maybe. And super excited. But really nice to see you,
Yes, thank
Danny,
you.
and hopefully do some more stuff
Yeah.
soon. But yeah, cool.
Welcome to
Podcast outside makes complete sense.
welcome to Bedfordshire, the home of fadeless splendour. It's true.